Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Modernizing Finance Through Digital Transformation. I'm George Jackson, Vice President of Events at GovExec, and your host for today's program. Many finance organizations are taking a strategic enterprise approach to digital adoption, designed to streamline their operations and transform their workforce. The goals? Ambitious. The possible benefits? Many. They include business systems modernization, efficiency, scalability, resource capacity, risk mitigation, and more. We've convened two pros to walk through some of the top issues here today. Paul Landauer is Associate DASN, that's Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Data and Digital Transformation, Financial Management Systems with the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Financial Management and Comptroller. Paul, welcome. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks, George, for having me. Super humbled to be here.
We are pumped. Also joining us, Ty Enmark, Principal with KPMG. Ty, great to see you again.
Thanks, George. Appreciate you having me on today.
So Paul, kick us off here. The Navy on this mission to, as I mentioned, streamline financial management systems, consolidate general ledger systems. Give us a state of the landscape there.
Sure. Thanks, George. Yeah. So it's been quite a journey, right? We, like many agencies and organizations, moved to the ERP in the 90s. And if we'd only known what we were doing back then, we maybe would have done things differently, but we didn't, and that's okay. But as we've evolved forward, and we begin to understand the tools and the speed at which things are moving, we're seeing the value and criticality of data as the bulwark and foundation. Many of the companies out there started in, and built their entire value proposition around data. On the federal side, right, we're having to kind of shoehorn it on the back end, and that creates some interesting challenges. And so one of the things that the Department of the Navy has done was to invest in and establish an enclave of Advana, which is an environment called Advancing Analytics that is OSD owned. The Navy's version of that is Jupiter, and it's an enterprise level platform for data analytics. Super critical. And what we're seeing, right, is that as we collapse general ledgers, we're specifically focused, at least right now, on the financial management side of this transformation. And as we collapse general ledgers into one place, we're able to then harness that enterprise level data and then tie it all together. And we've done, when we started this work, I'll say about, a year and a half ago or so, we were getting data at roughly a 30-day clip, give or take monthly, 45 to some. And we've been able to accelerate that process and speed from 45 days down to weekly, then to daily. And we're now sort of on the cusp of, and have even proven the example of 15-minute increments. And we're the first service to do a sort of cloud-to-cloud capture. And so first service there, pushing through, buying an Advana enclave, now doing cloud-to-cloud capture, changing that sort of speed of relevancy of data, really exciting. And what we've done in that environment, and then is to facilitate all enterprise level analytics. And so it isn't just FM. We're able to begin harnessing that general ledger and that systems consolidation into really leapfrogging forward the insights for decision makers. And so that's some of the big things, and we've seen the benefits of it already, where we're on the system side relative to our universe of transactions. We've been able to close 14 NFRs this past year, and I think we're sort of leading the way from an NFR closure. We've seen 35% growth on the platform. So we hit 5,000 users just this last week. So it's a terribly exciting time in the Department of the Navy.
There is so much, Paul, that I want to unpack there. I'm going to try and pace myself a little bit. Ty, I'd love to start with you on that, journey that they've been on from a speed perspective, 30 to 45 day clip down to weekly, down to daily, down to 15 minutes. That's pretty incredible I mean, stepping back from the Navy specifically, because you work across all of DoD, you work across other parts of the public sector, how does that comport with what you're seeing out there?
Well, it's very impressive to start, and not just the technical specifics that Paul was talking through, but how he's built a team that focuses on strategy, output, utilizing data as an asset to then be able to make decisions. A lot of times we say some of the technical parts of this are the easy part of it. It's how are you using that data? How are you culturally changing the way people are moving from the spreadsheets that they've had, homegrown solutions on their desktop to make financial decisions, to unleashing the power of the analytics? Because if you get things down to real time, but don't utilize all the capabilities that come along with that, then you're not really utilizing all the power of the platform that Paul and his team has been able to establish. So they've had very aggressive goals. They've challenged our team and challenged the Navy at every step of the way. And I think that healthy challenge of continuing to ask for more helps us to figure out what really works well and where we need to pivot. Sometimes a decision may not end in a result that was anticipated, but that's information that can help us to be able to build the next report, pull data in a different way, ultimately putting information in the hands of decision makers. And when all of a sudden you move to putting information in the hands of the decision makers through the analytics, you start building that data quality through catalogs and the governance around that, and it builds trust in the program. And when you have trust, when you have speed, and then when you have actionable information, it really helps the Navy and any organization to be able to move very quickly in terms of results back into systems consolidations where they're making financial decisions. And ultimately, as Paul had put it, every piece of data has a financial component to it. So it really can scale across the different domains in the Navy.
Paul, we mentioned before going on the air about the larger OSD effort that Greg Little's team has been undertaking in Advana. And you mentioned these kind of milestones that you've reached, but I want to go back to the beginning here for a moment. With Mr. Little's office and the sort of foundation that they had laid, the work on DoD's audit over the past several years, how did your team specifically kind of identify a strategy? How did you identify metrics that you wanted to hit to make this a successful program from the beginning? I think it'll be useful for people watching this program who are at the beginning stages of their journey.
Absolutely. Thanks, George. I would say our broad approach, right, was to take what Greg Little and the Advana team at OSD was doing and rip off and deploy, right? They had some secret sauce and some magic that was working. And one of those that's really important is, right, to make the platform available and remove barriers to entry is a really critical component. So the Department of the Navy decided in partnership with the CDO to make the platform free to users. If you want an account, you can get an account today. That was really important to sort of getting people to come over and use the tools and to invest. Some of the other things that we've at the foundation and core as we stood up the team is also, I remember meeting with Greg early and he recommended a book, Measure What Matters. And that book is about objectives and key results, right? And this idea of if you start with mission, vision, and values, and you're able to define objectives and key results, you can then, as a leadership team, step back and let your team really run at what are challenging, different, hard problems. And it really took the governor off with the right set of folks and the right culture. Right, the team just went after it, and it was the team that really was, hey, the first thing we need to do is get after the timeliness aspect of our data. And so that was even a push with Greg and his team of, hey, we want to move this to 15-minute increments. That that's a pretty good clip for 1.7 billion in transaction volume. That's a lot of money moving every day. So that was a big piece. So objectives and key results, and then adopting an agile framework and moving with, using tools like Jira and Confluence to really facilitate a team that's able to know what their what their mission, vision, values are. What is that increment that we're doing? What are those key things? Using the ceremonies around that work, and sticking to that agile mindset, right? If we can't get to it's in backlog. If you're pulling in, something else has to move to backlog. Doing that grooming, it's not sexy or radical, but when you do it well, it really does work. And that was another aspect that we leveraged off of Greg and his team. And then the tech stack, by buying it as part of the Department of the Navy and resourcing it, we were able to leverage that full tech stack, which is from, if I were to do that, or the Department of the Navy were to do that and sort of decide to do that tomorrow, it would take us 18 to 24 months minimum to put something like that in place. And by partnering with OSD, we did that over the course of, it took us longer to get money to them than it did for us to actually turn the light switch on. So there was so much in partnership, and then also sort of the collaborative nature, and we're seeing that across in the Department of the Navy now is, hey, have you guys dealt with this problem? How did you address this? Understanding that there's not just the technical side, but there's also the people side, right? The data literacy and working with folks and working in change management. And so Greg and his team across all of our portfolios on some level help coach and mentor us. And we share ideas and talk regularly across the program and continue to think about what's the next thing that we need to deliver. And it's been such a fun partnership to work with the Advana team and deliver outcomes, because that's what it's always been about.
Ty, let's broaden back out, and I want to pull on that thread that Paul raises around objectives and key results. Clearly speed is a big one. Delivering data and insights to leadership down the road is another. What are some other objectives and key results that are driving organizations in this arena?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Paul really framed it nicely, because they're going through a holistic data transformation. It's one thing to, just produce reports or analytics or outputs. It's another to change the whole cultural shift in landscape for how an environment is able to be embraced by its users. So when we look at digital transformation, specifically around the work we're doing with the Navy, we look at these in terms of 5 pillars. There's process and innovation. You can't do things the same way. You've got to be able to innovate creatively, but you also have to have that governance. And governance and innovation, those are kind of 2 words that usually don't go together, but you have to make sure that the innovation is going to define outputs and results that are within the context of the program, and helping to build that commonality that will allow the results to matriculate as the program is able to advance. There's the second pillar around technology, and Paul talked about Advana and specifically the Jupiter Enclave. There's a technology platform that's being unleashed on a daily basis based on all the capabilities that exist there. Utilizing all the power that the platform has, users are able to quickly, with speed, be able to bring data into the environment, define analytic sets, and then utilize what's already been built to expand on and drive further results. This is dashboards, these are drill down reports, these are analytics that are in real time into the decision makers' hands versus relying on spreadsheets and PowerPoints. And it always would take minutes, hours, days for people to be able to look at a report that might have been overcome by events by the time that data was actually in their hands. We talk about data and analytics, and this is their ability to leverage that data across the environment with various types of capabilities, moving into predictive machine learning, looking at, Paul had mentioned the universe of transactions, and how do we start utilizing those capabilities to identify where there may be issues with data coming from source systems, or duplicative results that can be then drilled into at a much more granular level. One of the most important parts is just the business environment and the culture, right? That change management, that message from the top in terms of the strategy, how we're going to roll out the operations, the communications, the buy-in, the getting folks aware of all the capabilities. Sometimes, we found that we roll out these wonderful capabilities that the Navy's invested in, and folks may not be aware of that. So there's been a great marketing campaign, both in terms of materials that have been produced, strategic reports, and then also at a lot of conferences and events like and sessions like we're able to have right now to be able to get the word out in terms of all the power and capability within that Jupiter environment. And then ultimately that drives engagement, right? People using the reports, people seeing all of the value that comes from that, and it just drives this kind of snowball effect of continuing to bring users onto the platform, continue to have users utilize these capabilities, and really see the results that are able to be accomplished.
Time mentions culture, Paul. You did as well. And I'm struck by, the Navy's efforts over the past few years to kind of restructure the organization from a personnel perspective. It raises the question in my mind about, how you communicate across the Navy for these types of efforts, how you kind of work in the chief information officer's shop. Like, how do you make sure that everybody's singing from a single sheet of music here?
Yeah, George, it's it is not a one size fits all, and there's just like the data work, the culture work is not a light switch, right? You can't just turn it on. It requires dedicated effort. I was doing data analytics as a bit of a side gig before I got asked to switch roles, and it was really sort of hey, this was really a full-time job, and the Navy leadership said, "You're right," and asked me to go support this as my full-time effort. And I'll tell you, most of my work is really talking across the aisles of the Navy, working with the OSD teams, and really trying to continue to enhance that discussion and narrative. The partnership with CIO and CDO are just critically important. FM, right? Data and FM, financial management data by itself, is sort of mildly interesting, but it isn't until you connect it to the other data sets, right? The HR, the logistics, in the Department of the Navy, readiness, acquisition, all of those other data sets that when connected to financial, and financial isn't the center, but it connects all of them, it really unleashes the power of opportunity for business leaders to understand a business so much faster, so much better, to make that much more of an informed decision. And so that's been a really critical piece of it. The marketing and advertising, I'll say that's a work in progress. We still learn every day about another opportunity or another place, or where we're seeing FM is really mature as a product of the investment in substantiated financial statements and our audit work. Really, right, that drove us to an acceleration into this space. And some of my counterparts that are working hard in their data environments and the data stewards across those other domains haven't had that luxury. And so that's the other piece that is critically important, is that we have to all be in it together. We have to continue to look for opportunities where, hey, maybe it's not the biggest use case for FM, but does it bring another steward or another domain owner forward, and helps them realize an insight for them and their community that much faster. The last part is really having somebody who's being a catalyst for change as a domain or enterprise at the full enterprise level, right? The Jupiter effort, and more broadly, right, has also been shepherded and advocated at the secretariat level, specifically by the Undersecretary of the Navy, as a place to go to really drive some of that. When Secretary Harker was here, he signed out a memo that says we're going to use Jupiter as an enterprise level platform, and we're also getting great from the office from OSD and from the leadership levels out there to say this is where we're all headed. Let's make sure that it's enterprise, and being really demanding in this space. So it's coming from top down. But we also see just this great groundswell of organic capacity growing, and it really is creating some of those opportunities for folks across the enterprise to have a place to go and do this work, and then sort of take the governor off and really run at a problem. It's just been wonderful to see. But it's been, everybody's kind of got to play in this, and everybody has a role to play. And it's not one domain person or not one individual. It really is an all hands on deck effort.
And George, I'll just build on that because, the messaging and the strength from the top down and bottom up, there's excitement around the program. And that excitement is needed in order to really, at the end of the day, we're trying to better equip the warfighter, right? Anything that we can do, from driving auditability, driving financial improvement, driving, where assets lie across the board, that ultimately is helping that warfighter. And everybody is very impassioned in terms of the mission. And the fact that you've got leadership buy-in and pushing the capabilities here that can, quickly drive results, it's something that helps drive, what we're doing from just a capability development and deployment perspective, because you've got folks that are eager to use everything that exists within the environment. But as Paul did put it, it is a team effort on a daily basis.
Paul, I think some of that excitement must be rooted in the insights that you mentioned. I mean, maybe give us an example or two of what decision makers are asking you for from an insight perspective. What can they do today that they couldn't do before you really shortened the amount of time from data to strategic insights?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, trying to pluck one is always a challenge. So some of the, what we're finding financially, and you really kind of have to let go. That's part of the transformation effort that we've seen. You kind of got to let go of what you thought you knew was true when you're on a data and digital transformation journey. Because, throughout, there's a lot of confirmation bias, and I think that's true of all organizations. And there's a lot of strongly held beliefs that sort of come through culture, and that's not bad. So we try really hard not to put judgments on data, right? It's not good or bad. It's just information that you can use to go forward. And so an example I would probably use, I'll give you a couple maybe. One was that historically, the Department of the Navy has had a very rear view looking view of its financial performance. And that's largely driven by many of our partners, including Congress, OSD, and again, not bad, just the way we've done it. So a rear view look, thinking about level of obligation. So how much money have I put on contract, if you will, right? So a level of obligation, a level of expenditure to an extent, but only for certain accounts, right? Like 1 year money, right? Is how fast did it spend? And then what money was I not able, or what resourcing was I not able to spend? So in the federal space, when we don't use our money in time, it reverts back to Treasury. And so that was the sort of historical model. And we spent a lot of time sort of looking back and saying, gosh, we spent a lot of money in Q4, or we have a high obligation trend in Q4. Or, after resources are available, we revert resources back to Treasury, and we would spend time looking at that information and asking people to if you think about that, data's coming in every 45 days, but it's got between 5 and 7 years of information across multiple fiscal years, just hundreds of billions of dollars that's flowing across at a transaction level. When you move data to being able to be visualized and analyzed at a transaction level daily, or even a 15-minute clip, you can begin to take that information and then apply it forward. And so, hey, there's a problem with the way I'm buying this part. Okay, now I know that you have that problem. I can apply it to today's information and bring an insight to it. So that's been an area where, and also to see volume levels, is to say, man, I'm chasing a lot of small dollar, high volume transactions. Should I even do that? Could I put a system change or a policy change in place? So that's some of the fruit that's coming out of that side of the house, is taking that rear view look and moving it to a forward look. We put together a group called the Commanders Enterprise Resource Management Council. And that's where we bring in the 3- and 4-star commanders, because it isn't just an FM problem, right? It's not just a financial management problem. We now understand our business better, and we can help those folks, those leaders across the enterprise, see how it connects to logistics, or see how it connects to how they're choosing to spend resources, to help them put buying power back into their pocket to go after that next most critical thing. That's been an exciting piece of work. I'm really excited about where we're headed with the RPA work, the robotic process automation work, as well as some of the machine learning that we're sort of just getting into. We just stood up machine learning about 6 months ago, but it's all of what I just said, and then putting modeling on it to hand to those commanders and hand to those users an insight that comes to them, right, based on a set of information and a set of parameters. We're seeing that across, but we're also starting to have discussions across the department of, okay, if you can see this level of insight, if I just had this one more attribute or data element, I could do this much more. And it's starting to take people sort of what's in the art of possible. And it's really, it just expounds really quickly. And so those are a couple of examples of where we've seen, I know for the data guys, right, the modeling and effort around, they spin it at, the first time they wrote the code, it took, it was timing out and it was taking days to turn. And they're learning fast enough to where they're bringing code that spins down into 15 minutes, hour. I know that's a huge success. But we're also seeing that from a spreadsheet standpoint, if you will, where we had a team that was, building multiple spreadsheets, and we were able to take that, put it in an analytic product. The first time we ran it, we thought we had an error because we didn't come up with the same result they did. When in fact, we actually caught an error on their spreadsheet. The machine, the model worked, and it found a problem with the output. And that was just fantastic. And again, the team was able to turn that dial, and there was a group of folks that were working really hard on that, and we automated it for them. So now they can go spend on the next piece of the work, improving the quality, and really expanding on that. So that's been some of the exciting stuff we've been seeing.
Ty, before I shift gears on topic here, something in there really resonated for you. You want to build on something Paul said?
Yeah, specifically around, now having the ability to ask questions that we couldn't even think of before, right? Because organizations, they're trying to focus on, how do we optimize the processes? How do we are able to, drive the top and bottom line? How are we able to achieve our mission better, faster, and with, the results that we're looking to achieve? There's a lot of capabilities that have been able to been spun up on this platform that allow the team to then ask the next set of questions to be able to build the next set of capabilities. And those things, didn't even exist. They weren't even being considered months ago. And now, the excitement that we have when we get into these planning sessions, and you've got the various teams from strategy and operations to data as a service to the University Transactions team, and how they're building upon each other and how they're able to utilize the capabilities one team is building or setting the stage for the other. It then lets the whole program move at that speed. And anytime you're putting information in terms of in the decision makers' hands, and they're able to then see those results, well, it quickly validates the investments that are being made and the desire to have more of those things, because it makes being able to perform your job in terms of executing decisions, it makes it that much easier. And that's really the power of the program that continues to reinvest in itself, builds on more capabilities, asks more questions, drives more output, and the results are magnified across the entire Navy.
Well, if you're just joining us, folks, you are watching Modernizing Finance Through Digital Transformation. My guests today are Paul Landauer, Associate DAZN for Data and Digital Transformation Financial Management Systems with the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and Ty Enmark, a principal at KPMG. It's been a great conversation. I am going to pivot slightly. And Ty, I'd love to start with you for this one. At the beginning, Paul mentioned if we knew then what we know now, taking us back to the beginning of the implementation here, he would have done some things differently. I think anyone would have. What are some common pitfalls across public sector that organizations run into when they're taking on an initiative of this size and scope?
Yeah, it's a good question because a lot of times, these are what we're facing aren't the results of decisions that occurred as part of this program, but it's and Paul had talked in the 90s taking the ERP approach, and technology was built a certain way, and we used different frameworks and approaches to be able to get the work done at that time. Well, technology, as we all know, has changed rapidly. Our approaches for delivering work have changed rapidly. um, you know, Taking data now and using that as an asset to be able to pull into other systems to execute processes, to use as analytics. A lot of times before we build, reports based on the data, on the reporting database from the core system. Well, those things have changed. We're able to pull data from all over the organization, and almost in real time, to then be able to use that as an asset to drive information. It also helps us to be able to focus in on where there's improvements to processes that can be quickly done in systems. We try to take a lightweight approach rather than having these large end-to-end implementations that take forever, and we see if we're succeeding or failing down the line. How can we spin up some lightweight components, utilizing whether it's low code platforms, utilizing robotics process automation, as Paul put it earlier, some of the machine learning and analytics capabilities, to be able to drive the output and results to support the mission. And that doesn't mean that we're just going to rip and replace, the large ERPs. They still have a place, but everything doesn't necessarily need to go into that. We're focusing in on what is the output, what are the results, and then where's the best place to be able to execute that implementation. And it's a combination of process, of technology, and then ultimately how you're using that data and analytics from insights to drive the organizations. It's a holistic digital transformation versus a traditional system implementation.
Paul, what is the role of shared services in this larger conversation we're having? What does that phrase have to do with what we're talking about today?
Yeah, sure. So for us, and broadly, right? There's too much to do in this space to try and go it alone. You absolutely, it's going to require partnership. It's going to require collaboration. But it also requires some expertise in certain areas. And so for our program, we've found that we needed to set a foundation of core shared services, and a few specifically. One is strategy and ops. So I talked a little bit about Agile, but the marketing, the communications, how we do the business, right, is really important so that the teams can focus on the work. So having that as a shared service is really how the program runs, really important. Not everybody needs to figure out how to do a press release, right? That should be, pretty formulaic. But similarly, how do we communicate our products? How do we know when a product is done? And how do we communicate that to our customers? Really important. The other shared services that we have out there are data as a service, right? Again, some technical expertise about how to pipeline data. So data engineers who are really good at that work, who can go into a design session, knows what we have, knows what capabilities are being asked, and can kind of translate that into a technical solution. Really important. And again, not everybody needs to be a data engineer. That's not necessarily critically important, but you need to have some that know what they're doing. It's really important. And you can cut through some of the barriers, right? I certainly couldn't do what that team does, and I appreciate what they deliver for us. We've also stood up data science as a service, right? So more on the machine learning AI side of things. Again, data scientists, right? Not everybody needs to be a data scientist, but you need some on your team to help maybe some of those analytic capabilities to take it to the next level, right? As we talk about the phases of analytics, is really important part of the team. And so sharing those services across. We also have automation as a service. We find some analytics lend themselves to an RPA, is that you build a visual or an insight, an analytic product. But man, if we had an RPA, well, we send them over to the automation as a service team to help facilitate that. Again, having those expertise. So those are just some of those shared service portfolios that are really foundational to the program. And then we also have our analytics as a service, but those tend to be more customer based, right? As the financial management or financial reporting, if you will, the budget side, executive analytics, then all the other, the sort of the back end folks deliver and matrix support the team. And then in the Navy, right, we're also thinking about how do we connect down and through the organization, as well as we're not going to do this by ourselves. We need those functional owners throughout the organization to deliver those insights. We talk as a team, right? If we're building something for ourselves, it's a failure of a product, right? We need to think about utilization. We actually changed our metric from when we started. We were thinking users was a good metric, and we've changed that to sessions and utilization rate at an analytic product level. And so just shows the maturity and how you have to change kind of what you think matters as you grow. And so then as you get all those shared services, you can start to talk about risks and dependencies. And you can also begin to really think hard about capacity planning as you begin to build out this work. If your data, if you don't have enough data engineers on your data as a service team, well, you better go get some, or you better scope back your work, right? And sometimes when you're building really fast, you don't take the time to think about that. But when you do it in an agile way and you got the right tools, you can start to take that into account. So it's been wonderful to see how the shared service has built that foundation, and it's really facilitated the team to spin at a much faster pace.
Paul mentioned risk here. I don't have to tell you, with these types of digital transformation efforts, it sort of renews the emphasis on cybersecurity. We're talking about a lot of important data here. What are some of the maybe opportunities or challenges or both when you undertake an effort like this in integrating cybersecurity really into the DNA of this type of program?
Yeah, first, it gives an opportunity to work across the organization, because there's folks in the CIO that are establishing policies, have implemented cybersecurity across the landscape that we're able to build upon. So first, it's looking at where there's processes, policies, documentation that we can be building upon to make sure that the data is secure, the environment is secure, because obviously that is mission number one. You've got to have a secure environment in which you operate on. Two, it's similar to the shared services. It helps people to understand what's out there, how to use it, and the right way to be able to using these things. When we're spinning up specific assets, there's folks that are out in the BSOs that may be facing a similar type of challenge. So it can either drive them to the environment, and there's obviously onboarding processes to go through that help make sure security is embedded all across the board, as well as when they're building in their own environments. There's work that's already been done from a code base perspective, or being able to start a certain percentage along the way. So those are incredibly important to being able to have the trust in the environment that the program can be built upon, and it helps people understand that the things are being done the right way, from strategy on down to execution. Another part of that is just overall, as Paul had mentioned, Jupiter's an enclave within Advana. There's going to be other Air Force and other agencies that are going to be driving and creating their own enclaves. They're able to build upon a lot of the success and lesson learned and documentation and approach and engineering work that's been done in the Jupiter enclave to be able to fast track some of the work that they're going through.
I'm almost amazed, Paul, that we haven't really talked about money yet in this wide-ranging conversation around revamping financial systems. Like, there's a cost savings element to this discussion too, right?
George, there absolutely is. But it's interesting, I don't try to fixate on that. I'll be perfectly honest, because in my experience and from what we've seen is there's certainly the cost that you could capture. And we've seen that through some of the efforts to rationalize systems and environments. What we're seeing though is the capacity building that's happening, and that is almost immeasurable relative to, in essence, giving people time back and then focusing attention on the things that matter. How much is that worth, right? It seems like industry is just in a completely different place relative to the valuation of data. And in government, sometimes we fixate on return on investment. And I've just been approaching it broadly, and I think the department has, in general, while savings is important, the shift in transformation, there isn't anything that I wouldn't pay to make this happen, because it's so important to what we're trying to achieve and so important to the American people. And so that's why it's just been, there's savings. And we challenge the team as could we, write some code that would do some math based on if you run this report, you saved X. Totally doable. But I'd rather them spend the time, building out more and delivering more customer insight and building more capacity than proving to ourselves that what we're doing is valuable, because the value proposition is on some level in that intangible, just adding capacity left and right, and changing the way we think about the business. And because it's a cultural, like, where do how do you value that? And if you stop and spend so much time to calculate it and build it, I don't want to get into the business of defending this. The return on investment speaks for itself, right? The program sells because we deliver outcomes over and over again. And if we can just keep that mindset and mantra, really focused on delivery and outcomes, then we've seen that the customer is just passionate about the delivery as well.
And George, lots of times there's going to be an increase in cost when you spin up any type of digital transformation, new capabilities. But you also have to look at it the way Paul put it. What is the cost of not doing this and not having these capabilities to be able to change the way that we're executing work, to be able to do things better, faster, quicker, and to drive the outputs that are needed in order to actually run the end-to-end operations. You can't sustain a business off of spreadsheets. You can't sustain a business based on legacy technology. And although there is an investment that goes in, you're able to quickly see the results, but also position yourself for success over the next number of iterations, next number of sprints, next number of years that are going to be able to better empower everybody in the work that they're doing.
Gentlemen, we're close to the end of our conversation here, and I want to do a bit of a lightning round. Paul, starting with you, what did we miss? What did you want to cover today that we haven't hit yet?
Sure. This is really a cultural transformation, and it starts with people. It's a people business. What we do is not technically challenging. It's hard, don't get me wrong, but folks out there have done this before. It's challenging on the people side, and focusing on that, and being a customer service organization is really important to that. And then keeping that enterprise level approach is super important. I often ask people to think about, how can I help data and digital transformation? Am I a barrier to it? And today, right, if I'm a barrier, what could I do to remove that barrier? And ask people to think of themselves a little bit more like data. And by that, I mean, data doesn't care about where you are in the organization. It doesn't care about who your boss is or where you report to, but it is interested, right, in going up, down, through, across the organization to produce that outcome. And so if we could get people to act like data a little bit more, and really let go a little bit, because it does take some risk taking. And if you're not in for some risk taking, the digital transformation and moving out in this area is just, it's going to be particularly hard.
What about you, Ty? Final thought.
Yeah, you've got to have strong leaders in place that can support and promote the program. You need to move fast and drive results, but you have to have a strategy that's going to guide where you're going. You've got to have governance and trust in the program that are going to be able to show not only that you can drive results, but you can drive results that matter. And ultimately, you've got to have a program that's going to be built in a way that it will last, that it it's the go-to place to continue to build capabilities, because as we see just in the geopolitical environment and the priorities that continuously spin up and the threats that exist, dollars and priorities shift. And when you can have a program that drives results that impact operations, impact efficiency, impact auditability, impact the Navy's ability to execute their mission, then that's something that is well worth the investment, that people are going to continue to support. And ultimately, you've got great innovative ways that are driving folks to get in this environment, build up their own capabilities, and have long-lasting careers that have them excited in terms of the job that they're performing on a daily basis.
Paul, I'll note Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. Is this a bit of a challenge from the Navy to the other service branches? Keep up with us?
I'm sure that's out there. Absolutely.
Well, Paul Landauer, Ty Enmark, thanks for being here, gentlemen. Great conversation.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much.
I also want to thank KPMG for making this program possible. Thank you, of course, our audience, for tuning in today. We'll get this video out to you on demand later this week, so pass it along to your colleagues who are similarly working to modernize finance through digital transformation. For GovExec, I'm George Jackson. Have a great day.